Robyn Nelson of Wrestle Popcast with my co-host
David Stockwell from DemoBlastStudios.com.
And we're here with UFC Legend, NWA Pro Wrestling Legend, WWE Legend, Dan Severn. How's it going?
Hi guys, how are we doing there today?
So what have you been up to?
Well, it's probably easier to say what haven't I been up to. I like to say I'm probably the most active guy in probably either professional wrestling or mixed martial arts, but most people aren't aware of it because they don't follow Dan Severn as to all the little things that he does in his life. Professional wrestling and mixed martial arts were just a small portion of what I've done and what I continue to do. I'm still involved in the industries, just doing different things.
Ladies and gentlemen, in just a few moments.
Tell us some memorable moments when you were in the UFC when you fought the likes of Tank Abbott, Ken Shamrock, all the great legends.
Well, I'll tell you what, asking a question like that, it always comes right back to one moment in time, and that is the, let's see, it would be for the smallest belt that I own. The smallest belt that I own is known as the Ultimate. Now, for that particular event, they brought back various champions and or runner-ups. It was supposed to be like the Super Bowl of events. This was held up in Denver, Colorado, mile-high elevation. I was inside of the Octagon cage between my three opponents just over 1 hour. Coming up on November 10th is going to be the 25th anniversary show taking place in Denver, Colorado. Can you kind of guess one of the people that they might be bringing in?
He's got a lot of different variety. You saw him on America's Got Talent.
You know, Dan, in addition, obviously, to being a legend in mixed martial arts, obviously, you crossed over into the world of professional wrestling. Initially, for your pro wrestling debut, at least in part trained by the Snowman Al Snow. If you would be so kind as to talk a little bit about that particular time frame and your thoughts about your relationship with Al Snow.
Sure. I mean, it was the person who actually made the introduction was a professional wrestler that went by the ring name Denny Cass. He was also the president of the Michigan Wrestling Club, an amateur wrestling organization for both freestyle and Greco-Roman. He was the president, and I was the actual head coach. When our normal duties were done, I would stick around for another 10 or 15 minutes and pick his mind. I had been approached by a number of independent organizations into the 80s. I did not turn pro at that time because had I turned pro, I would have lost my amateur status. As of the 92 Olympics, a new rule came down from the United States Olympic Committee that allowed athletes to be both amateur and professional simultaneously, as long as you were not involved in high school athletic programs or collegiate, because you're still being governed by NCAA rules or your high school athletic association rules. I was well past my collegiate eligibility, so I could have my cake and eat it too. I could be a professional wrestler, and then I could still try to make an Olympic team, because that, my amateur wrestling career is what I say. I pay all my gratitude for all of the success that I have had today.
And
I did not answer your question. I mean, that's the prelude. Denny Cass painted a very dark picture of the professional wrestling industry. What I do nowadays when people want to get into professional wrestling, I go, have you ever seen the movie The Wrestler, starring Mickey Rourke?
Yes.
And when they say they haven't, I'll simply say, no, part of your homework, I want you to go watch it. And then come back and talk to me. And I go, because I want them to realize, don't put all your eggs into that basket. The professional wrestling basket, it's not based upon you and your abilities. It is so politically orientated. It's kind of like, who do you know? Who are you going to get a push from? Who do you know inside this industry? There are some really wonderful wrestlers on the independent scene that will never get the opportunity to be at the big show working for the WWE. They are the #1 company in the world, but they just will never be there, and they can work circles around some of the top talent inside, that organization. But that's what I like about athletics, in the sense that if you knock me out, guess what? You move on, you win. Okay,
Speaking of indie wrestlers, what do you think of Awesome Gary Dawson?
well, I guess the word awesome has already been utilized. I don't want to be so redundant right now, but no, I've known Gary for a number of years. I really enjoy having him come into the training facility. I've even brought him in on several different occasions simply to teach his way, because I want people to get exposed from different people, because everyone's got a little bit different approach as to how to do things, and he's just a very even-keeled individual, so I like having him come on in. And so I'm looking forward to even the next edition.
And also, you worked with Jim Cornette, who was your manager as well. What can you tell some great stories of Cornette and some memorable moments with him?
Well, sure. I have to show the picture right there. That Jim Cornette. I mean, first off, the guy is a walking encyclopedia. If you start to ask him a couple questions, you could see the child come out, because he is very passionate about the business, and that's the wonderful thing about him. He cares about the industry. He wants to make sense out of sometimes an industry that makes no sense whatsoever. I've seen certain angles that they've come up with. I'm thinking, who are you trying to fool? Are you just did the administration get a little bit bored and now they're just trying to amuse themselves right now? I don't get it. But
Now's the time.
he's a walking encyclopedia, a historian. He has been involved in my life on 3 different occasions that made some great impacts. He helped when I was first working Smoky Mountain Wrestling is what he's doing.
Yep.
And so that's where I go down and I basically end up beating Chris Candido, his champion at the time, for the NWA strap. And then I start taking it all over the world, including brought to the Octagon cage itself. So, this is the only picture in history where it shows a professional wrestler. My first title belt was professional wrestling, NWA title belt, after winning the UFC title belt inside the Octagon cage. Dennis Carluzzo, a promoter from New Jersey who's no longer with us, he's the one that basically, he proudly carried the NWA down, part of our entourage. And trust me, the UFC wanted to have nothing to do with professional wrestling because they were trying to promote it. We're real, we're legit. I had to educate them about the history of the belt, of some of the people that have carried the belt. I go, this is a very prestigious belt, and you don't have to ever worry about me doing something silly with it.
So what did UFC think about when you were carrying the title and the WWF belt at the same time?
I don't think the UFC, are you talking about from the UFC's perspective?
Yes.
The UFC doesn't really realize how much exposure that I end up getting for them. Ken Shamrock was already in the WWF, but he never talked about the UFC. I've got Jim Cornette, my mouthpiece. He's carrying down 2 UFC belts. I'm carrying down the NWA belt, a UFC belt, and they're talking about UFC this, UFC that. Most professional wrestling people, they had never heard of UFC. What is UFC? So on a weekly basis, how many millions of people was I getting in front of with these UFC title belts, getting this company exposure during the times when they were lucky to get 3,000 people in an arena to watch what was the most barbaric time period of mixed martial arts, which was known as no holds barred, 2 rules, no biting, no eye gouging, no weight classes, no gloves, and the 8-man tournament.
Hall of Famer Teddy Long.
Mr. Severn, I've got 2 quick questions. Obviously, so many years have passed since those early days of the UFC, even the time working for WWF at the time. You stand out not just because of the skill that you showed, whether it be in the Octagon or a wrestling ring, but there's more to you than just that. If you would talk, specifically to the younger generation as far as things that people can do to make themselves stand out in a sea of clones and other competition.
Well, I mean, that's a pretty wide open question, or that's where we go with. When I started into the world of professional wrestling, I jumped into it for a lot of different reasons. Why I jumped into it. Too long of a story to go into right now. And I did have a dual career. I was never exclusive to the WWF. It's my contract that got negotiated. Everyone else, Vince McMahon owned you. I could come and go as I pleased. No, I can't say as pleased. I had a schedule where I knew I had X number of dates on an annual basis that I give to you. The NWA wanted me exclusive to them. I go, no. I said, unless you're willing to pay me to be exclusive. That means if another company wants me on a weekend that you don't need me, I should be able to go. Otherwise, are you willing to pay me what they're offering for me to sit home? So again, first guy ever to be non-exclusive to the UFC, non-exclusive to the WWF at the time, but then nor to the NWA. So, but I was a 37-year-old cat when I started my cage fighting career. Basically, by 92, I started my professional wrestling. By 94, I jumped into cage fighting. No one starts a cage fighting career at 37. By the time I made it to WWF, Vince McMahon did not realize how old I was until after the contract was signed. And at the time we're in there, because all my negotiations were with Jim Ross. And so we're in the office, handshake, slaps on the back, all happening. So a couple things were said. Then Vince looked at me and says, well, how old are you? I go, I'm 48. And he looks for Jim Ross. He goes, well, Jim, who's our oldest rookie ever? And Jim goes, Dan. But I didn't look 48, nor did I act 48. I'm a 60-year-old guy now. I don't look like a 60-year-old guy. I don't act. I don't move like a 60-year-old guy. You know, none of us none of us is going to beat out Father Time. But the thing is, how much life have you lived? And I look at that. I lived the life of half a dozen men already. I'm hoping to live the life of another half a dozen in the next segment. So there will be a book number 2 and a book number 3. That the different chapters of what Dan Severn is about. Because I never have put all my eggs in one basket. Because you asked me before the variety of things I do. I work with first responders, law enforcement, corrections, air marshals, border patrol, military, on all hand-to-hand type combatants. My program kicks in when all things go wrong, and now you find yourself down on the ground. But when you're on the ground, if it's military, you might have a rucksack on your back with 80 pounds of gear on top of the boots and the uniform you have. If you're an officer, a bulletproof vest, nightstick, taser, you're like a tortoise. It's easy to move when you have trunks, t-shirts, rash guards, easy to move at that point in time. So again, I take in a lot of different characteristics, and like I said, I wish I had half a dozen more of clones of myself, just younger models. I'd be slapping mustaches on each of them. I'd send them on up because I really enjoy what I do. The thing is, there's not enough time to do it all.
Well, I've got one last question for you, Mr. Severn. Obviously, you spoke earlier about Jim Cornette and your time in Smoky Mountain Wrestling. One of my best friends in the wrestling industry is a gentleman named Bobby Blaze Smedley. I don't know if you remember Bobby. He worked for Smoky Mountain Wrestling. I believe he may have even wrestled you at one point. Bobby Blaze Smedley. He ended up being champion at one point. I know. Just any thoughts you may have of that match, or just Bobby in general? He's a good guy. He's written a couple books. If I interview you and I don't mention him, he's going to be awfully sore at me. So any thoughts on Bobby Blaze?
Well, no, with Bobby, I know we've wrestled at least once, maybe a couple times. I don't know if it was for Smoky Mountain or somewhere else on the circuit, but no, it was. All my matches are very physical. I always tell people that, and I think actually we did. We incorporated some amateur wrestling moves into that match as well. Something that is different from what you'll see even later this evening. Just ways of how to move around the ring, or the way that you tie up. Do it from a more of an amateur wrestling type flair versus the professional wrestling. So I like to incorporate different things from my past, whether it was from the mixed martial arts, from amateur wrestling, Greco-Roman, freestyle wrestling. There's a lot of different aspects there, but no, I look back upon all the different things I've done and very fond memories, because that's what they are now.
Robyn, any last thoughts here?
Not on my mind right now, but thank you for taking your time for coming on.
Well, I was just simply to tell folks, if you want to find out more about the man they call the Beast, simply go to my website at www.dansevern.com and you'll see it all.